All right, guys, so we're back doing chapter 12, contact, commerce, and colonization between 1450 and 1600. I'm going to go through the first about 15 to 20 slides, and we're going to stop there for the day. It should take about 15 to 20 minutes or so to get through all of these. So what we're going to talk about in this chapter is the Europeans discovering the Americas and beginning a complex process that changes the ways people around the world interact with one another forever. The second thing is, for the first time, we have major world empires that are oceanic, overseas empires rather than continental empires. We have, despite the long-term significance of European activity in the Americas, most Africans and Asians are barely aware of the Americas or the expansion of long-distance trade. Within Europe, dynastic states are going to concentrate attention and resources on their own internal rivalries. Religious revolts, especially the Protestant Reformation, is going to intensify those rivalries as well. And finally, we're going to talk about Asian empires thriving in the 16th century thanks to commercial expansion and political consolidation. So in this one, we're going to be able to describe the broad patterns of the world trade after 1450 and compare major features of world trade in Asia, the Americas, Africa, and in Europe. We're going to analyze the factors that enabled Europeans to increase their trade relationships with Asian empires in the 15th and 16th centuries and assess their significance. We're going to compare the practices and the impact of European explorers in Asia and the Americas. We're going to analyze the social and political relationships and explain the resources of conflict within the Afro-Eurasian polities. And finally, we're going to assess how European colonization of Americas affected African and Amerindian peoples and describe their responses. So it's going to be a lot of death, a lot of diseases, and a lot of destruction of those areas, and we're going to see how that's going to play a role in their lives. All right, so contact, commerce, and colonization. Waves of exploration that opened up new territories for resources and potential converts. So we have Magellan. Magellan is going to be one of the first explorers who is going to start trading and start leaving. So Magellan is going to leave the Spanish mainland, and after about 3 years, one of his vessels is going to return. But unfortunately, the cost of that travel is very expensive, excuse me. So Magellan is going to lose his life. The majority of his sailors are going to lose their life. They're going to lose the majority of their ships. So they're going to leave with 5 ships and only come back with 1. And so we're going to see how these things are going to evolve over time. And then we're going to have Christopher Columbus, who, as you guys know, originally thought that he had made it to India, but in actuality was in Hispaniola, or modern-day Haiti and Dominican Republic. And we're going to see how these things were allowed to flourish and to happen because of economic prosperity in European nations. We're going to see Europeans begin overseas empires, so we'll start to see like the Portuguese, the Spanish, and eventually later on English, or the English people are going to also expand their empires across the seas. We're going to see the first significant migration to America since the Ice Age. So before, during the Ice Age, we had the, what's it called? Dr. Gerber, what's the peninsula called they walked across to get to Alaska?
Bering Strait.
There we go. All right, they're going to walk across the Bering Strait during the Ice Age. And that's going to be the original migration into the Americas. But after the Ice Age ends, there really isn't much immigration into the Americas. So we'll see that first significant migration happening from the European nations into America. And finally, we'll talk about the Protestant Revolution and how that played a role in European history and eventually the spread of trade around the world. All right, so the old and the new. Just in the previous chapter, we were talking about how in order for a lot of these countries and places to rebound after the Black Plague, they had to go back and use some previous traditional things that worked, as well as create new ways. So the same thing is also going to happen when we think about Afro-Eurasian trade, or trade when we cross the Atlantic, excuse me. So Afro-Eurasian trade is going to be revived after Black Death destruction, with the Indian Ocean maritime trade and Chinese seas as the focal points. So we'll see how China is going to play a role in the imperial or the colonization of the rest of the world. Let's see. Okay, perfect. It goes into all of that. All right, next up, we're going to see how European traders began exploring the Atlantic African coast in their attempts to search for new routes to South and East Asia. They were looking for spices like spices, silk, and slaves as well. To spices for obviously for seasoning their food, silk for their garments, and the slaves to build their societies. They were aided by new maritime technology, including new sails that allowed them to not just try to avoid the wind, but actually sail into the wind, and allowed them to use the wind or move the sails around to their benefit. And we're going to see Portuguese are going to go around to Africa and onward into India. So for a lot of the Portuguese people, they had heard about this great African person who supposedly had a lot of gold in the middle of Africa. If you guys remember, that's going to be Mansa Musa, more than likely, that they're thinking that they had heard of, excuse me. And so we'll see how that story of Mansa Musa is going to lead people into Africa looking for gold or looking for spices or looking for different things. All right, so the revival of Asian economies. So number one, so originally we know that printed money or flying cash was created in China. And it was just a way that they could ensure that if you didn't have any metal, or if you didn't have whatever that was, you were able to still buy things and everything had equal value. But we'll see that because of inflation, people are going to print out way too much money. Business or merchants are not going to be super trusting of paper money. So we're going to see in China, even though they created flying cash, they're going to rely heavily on silver. And so silver is going to fund the revival of trade across the Indian Ocean and traditional overland routes. The Ming moved the capital from Nanjing to the prosperous city of Beijing. So Nanjing is going to have about 1 million people living there, and Beijing has a population of about 500,000 during this time period. So you'll see how these cities kind of come together and how they use their different resources and their populations as well to benefit them over the long run. If you guys know about Chinese culture now, Nanjing and Beijing are still large cities in China. The reconstruction of the Grand Canal improved north and south transportation networks for trade. So we're able to move goods easier, more efficiently, because the Grand Canal has been fixed, has been modified. And next up we have, despite official Ming restrictions on trade, merchants and coastal cities remain active. So we're going to see that the Ming are going to pull back on their allowing of trade, but trade is still going to flourish heavily in Chinese society during this time period. And so silver, as I said previously, is going to be the basis of the monetary system. They're getting away from flying cash and moving back towards towards silver. And with that, because they're not major silver producers, they have to go out and find silver. So one place that they're going to go to find silver is going to be Japan. Japan is going to be known as the Silver Islands because they had so much silver coming out of Japan. The other one, all right, so after the 1570s, the Philippines under the Spanish became China's gateway for silver from the New World. And so we'll see that eventually about 1/3 of all Chinese silver is going to come from, where are we at? All right, 1/3 of all mined silver in the Americas is eventually going to go to Chinese hands between the 16th and 17th century. So China was literally looking all across the world to get their silver, enough silver to keep their economy thriving and doing well. All right, and so we're going to see China's economic expansion contribute to the revival of the Indian Ocean trade. Obviously, we know where China is located. They're right off of the Indian Ocean, so it makes sense for them to come back around and do a lot of trading in the Indian Ocean basin with Asian countries, India, and some North African or East African countries, excuse me. And so we'll see that Muslims are going to be the dominant force during this time with trading. Because we learned previously that some of the tenets in Islam, some of the rules in Islam work very, very well for business, and that allows Muslim traders to economically thrive. We'll see the Indian population is the Indian geographic center and economic center of numerous trade routes. We remember what India looks like. India is a peninsula, 3 sides of bitter water, which means that they are great for maritime trade. They're going to be perfectly located for that. Plus, they have a large population base as well. They're they're getting closer to 1 million people in some of their larger cities, including Delhi, Lahore, and I'm drawing a blank on the third one that was mentioned in the book. And so we'll see the Indian population is going to expand almost as quickly as China's, and we'll see Bengal exported textile or Indian exported textiles and rice throughout South and Southwest Asia, and we're also going to see imported silver for them as well. Overland commerce is also going to trade. So we talked about maritime trade, but we're also going to have a lot more trading over land instead of just utilizing the water. And so we'll see a maintained refreshment and military stations along the routes. So we know those as entrepôts. Those are going to be those spots where people come together right out, by trading areas where they can live, recoup, get rest, and replenish all of their supplies before they go on to their next location along the trading route. The largest accommodating 800 travelers and their animals. So we're going to see that the Ottoman Empire or the Ottoman authorities are going to be very, very big on impressing people and making sure that they have places to stay and just get their lives back in order after they've been traveling for a very long time. So one of the ones that we know of is going to have space for at least 800 travelers as well as all of their animals. So these are going to be large compounds, large complex compounds that are able to sustain travelers and sustain communities as well. All right, so overland commerce is going to thrive. So we have the Ottoman Empire encouraging caravan trades and providing considerable tax, and it's going to provide considerable tax revenue. We know that we are in the heart of the Ottoman Empire. They're going to be the longest lasting empire that we've ever seen. So once again, they go from I think the 500s all the way down to 1918. All right, so government leaders and merchants both paid local leaders as cash protection money to stop raids along the routes. So we have these people called marauders. They're called marauders. And marauders are people who just basically go around and rob places they don't have a lot of money or a lot of resources. So marauders are going to be a very big issue for the Ottoman Empire, to the point where they're going to pay chieftains in the areas to make sure that these marauders do not become bigger issues or continue to rob the travelers who are coming in and out of the areas. All right, we're on slide number 8. All right, the emergence of Ottoman Empire and its control of overland trade routes from Europe to Asia prompted exploration of new sea routes. So we have Portuguese are going to take the lead, and let's get to that part in the book. So we have Portuguese who are going to take the lead, and the first person that we talk about is going to be Vasco da Gama, and how he is able to. All right, he's going to send 4 ships around the Cape of Good Hope, and he's going to he found a network of commercial ties spanning the Indian Ocean, as well as skilled Muslim mariners who knew the currents, winds, and ports of call. So he's going to utilize a lot of the resources that he has around him, people who know about these areas, Muslim traders, Muslim travelers, to benefit him and to work with him. And so we know that the Europeans are always looking for silver and gold, along with spices and things like that. But silver and gold are their big pushes, because as I said previously, they had heard about Mansa Musa and were looking for all the gold that he had previously brought throughout North Africa and parts of Europe. Portuguese exploration. So we have new maritime technologies and information from other mariners that are going to help Portuguese navigate along treacherous African coast. So we'll see the Caravel, which is going to be that new ship that I was talking about, where the sails are able to move. We're going to help with the trading inside of Africa, or going towards Africa. Also, we're going to see the compass and the astrolabe are going to help determine latitude. So those were created centuries previously, but they are being perfected and modified so they can better assist with maritime trade. In Asia, the goal was to access the commercial network and trading system. So we have a lot of in Asia, the goal was to access commercial networks and trading systems. And so we're going to see a lot of the tools that they were using in China are going to start to be seen across the world. So one of them that we know of is gunpowder, and we're going to see how the Europeans are going to utilize gunpowder. They're going to add it to their cannons and put cannons on their ships so they're able to go in and just kind of blow places out and destroy these places. Vasco da Gama, as I said previously, is going to be the first mariner to reach the Cape of Good Hope, and he's going to allow Portuguese to keep a portion of profits from trading along the route, and he's going to be benefited from Asian prosperity, but did not impose Portuguese rule. So he was all about making money and not so much about territorial expansions. So we'll see that that mentality is going to shift over time with the European colonizers, but the original interaction with the Portuguese, they were just about money, silver and gold, and not looking for territorial expansions. The development of new Atlantic sea lanes began in epochal transformation in world history. So we're going to see overseas colonies start to rise. So conquered native people and created colonies to enrich themselves and their monarchs. So we're going to see, instead of these areas just consuming them, previously when we have places being conquered, they'll just take taxes from them, or they'll kill them off, or things like that. But now we're going to see that countries are establishing dominion or control over large areas of the world. All right, so accidentally discovery led to conquest with great wealth for Europeans. So we know that accidental discovery is going to be Christopher Columbus thinking that he made it to India, when in actuality he made it to the Americas, and all of the wonderful things that are going to come to the Europeans because of this discovery. So we're going to see European diseases, weaponry, and horses that are going to decimate the Amerindians. So we know that smallpox is going to be one of the diseases that's going to come through and just kill off large groups of Indians because they have no resistance at all. Most of the resistance are most of the interaction that we have going on in the world is between Africa, Europe, and Asia. And so those three areas all have immunities to diseases. But when you start going into the Americas are basically very, very isolated and have no immunity at all to any of the European diseases or African diseases or Asian diseases. And so we'll see that in certain places they're going to lose about 90 to 95% of their populations after their first interaction with Europeans. All right, material advantages and local allies enabled Europeans to colonize as they could not do in Asia or in Africa. So just basically the layout of the Americas made it very easy for Europeans to come in and take over. Also, a lot of the Americans didn't understand or didn't really have an understanding of what the Europeans meant or what they were bringing with them, including their weapons, including their religious beliefs, including everything. So some of it was a little bit of shock and awe where they didn't necessarily act, even when they could have, because they were just kind of shocked. We know with the Aztecs, they're going to believe that it's actually like a god who is sending people in, and that's going to be part of the reason why they don't respond with violence as they would typically do in other areas. All right, lack of labor force from Amerindians led to large-scale introduction of African slave laborers. I said previously that about 95% of the population of the Amerindians are going to die depending on their location, which means that we have a lot of work that needs to be done in the Americas, but they can't do it, which is going to necessitate bringing in African slaves directly from West Africa. All right, so we have on October 2nd, 1492, so 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Columbus is going to reach the Caribbean island that he calls Hispaniola, which is actually where we have the Dominican Republic and Haiti currently. His goals were to make money and to Christianize the world, which drove the European colonization of the Americas. So once again, it's about money and it's about spreading religion. So we know those 3 G's that people go out for when it comes to fighting or war or to exploration. It's God, glory, and gold. So we have gold and we have God for sure being utilized with Columbus, and we can even say glory because he wanted to be one of the first ones as well. So those 3 G's are going to be very important to Columbus and to a lot of colonization that we're going to hear about in the future. So just make sure you guys know money and religion are usually the 2 things that go along with colonization. All right, so Columbus is gonna mislabel the Taínos as Indians because he thought he had reached India. And so he described them as childlike people with no religion, and they were ready for conversion. Yes, and so he's also going to see that they have gold pendants that they wear around in their noses in different places, and he's going to assume that they have lots of gold, and he's going to instruct them to bring all the gold to him. So we'll see that he wants their gold, but they don't really have all that much, which is going to lead him to further exploration. So the Taínos basically told him that they're not the savages, but there are some savage Caribbeans who practice cannibalism, and that ideal of Indians who were cannibals came from that story that the Taínos had told Columbus and his men. And so we have contrasting images of innocents and savages, which structured European misunderstanding of Native American people and also drove their fear of them as well. All right, so historians know less about Indian perception of Europeans for obvious reasons, because so many of them died. So we only have about 5% of that population who survived. And of that 5%, who knows how many of them were able to tell their stories and tell them accurately. So that side of history is pretty much lost because so many of them died. All right, so European appearances and military prowess impressed them. They were also shocked by their hair. They were super hairy, and a lot of the Amerindians had never seen people so hairy. They had bad breath, and they had really, really horrible manners.
Gabriel Rodriguez, report to the attendance office. Gabriel Rodriguez, report to the attendance office.
They also noticed how unable the natives or the Europeans were to move off the land. They were destroying the land, they were destroying everything, and it just wasn't boding well for the...
Malik Gales, report to the attendance office. Malik Gales, report to the attendance office.
All right, guys, so your map for the week is the exploration map. So you guys can see how all the exploration have traveled out of Europe and around the world, eventually into South America and to North America, and then into the islands. So we come back around the Pacific Ocean and back over here. All right, so the first conquest. So we have Columbus who's going to claim there's gold on Hispaniola, which I said previously is modern day Haiti and the Dominican Republic. So we're going to see Spain send a lot more people. So originally, I think Columbus came with 100 plus people. Let me verify that. Columbus is going to come with about 100 plus people, but eventually, there we go. He's going to come with 87 men and 3 small ships, but 10 years later, the Spanish are going to send 2,500 people into Hispaniola to search for that gold. So they're going to continue to invest in resources.
Clarissa Gonzalez, please report to room 213. Clarissa Gonzalez, room 213.
All right, the Spanish experimented with institutions of colonial rule, ultimately creating a model for the rest of the world of New World colonies. So we're going to see how they abuse and use the country and the people for their good. We'll see Indian resistance. So the Spaniards are going to respond by enslaving the Indians and making them work in gold mines. So we have the Encomendina or Encomendero system, where basically you have the Europeans that are going to come in and just take over the land and essentially kind of sharecrop it out to people or to the Amerindians and make them work on that land for free. They're going to be overworked, they're going to be super diseased, they're going to be abused, and it's not going to bode well for the Amerindians, which is why they're going to eventually bring in African slaves later on. All right, and so we're going to see they're going to pay a special tax on extracted precious metals, but as they depleted the resources, the Spaniards are going to look for new territories, and those new territories are going to take them further into North America, or into North and South America, actually. And so we'll see larger, more complex, and more militarized societies, including the Aztecs and the Incas, and we'll see how they're going to interact with them, and we'll also see how they're still unprepared for European assaults because they have never seen anyone like the Europeans before, so they're just completely unprepared for their interaction with them. All right, Aztec society. So the Aztecs gradually united numerous independent states under a single monarch, along with counselors, military leaders, and priests. They had a very complex and organized society. And so their empire is going to have about 25 million people. During this time period, that's going to be a lot of people, especially in the Americas, since they're going to be known as more of an isolated, less populated area during this time period. They're going to be, so we have one that's going to be based around Tenochtitlan in Lake Texcoco. It's a religious and political building in its center. So basically, it's going to be, everything is going to be concentric. So everything is going to center around the religious and political buildings, and they're going to build outward from the center of the city. So you can probably tell how important you are or your ranking in the city by how close you live to the center or the religious center or the political center of the city. All right.